In the United Kingdom, 1 in 5 people have experienced some form of sexual abuse. 8.1 million of those are under the age of 16 years old. 1 in 7 people will never tell anyone about their abuse. My name is Joe Ward, and this is Victim 3.
My name's Sophie, I'm 26 years old. At the age of 12, I was abused by one man, which led to me being abused by over 100 other men and women.
I'm Robbie Constant, I'm 38, and I was abused when I was 10 years old.
My name's Kerry, I'm 43 years old, and I'm here to talk about my cycle of abuse.
52,000 children are currently in households where they risk abuse.
I think the upbringing of living with my nan had some effect on what happened to me, because she wasn't proactive on checking on my safety, checking where I was, checking, I'd tell her I was staying with a friend, she wouldn't check with that friend, whereas my mum would.
I'm the youngest of 4, and they were all boys. All of them basically ran away at quite an early age, because our dad was a full-blown alcoholic. He was very anti, people that were gay. He was anti same-sex living together, and he was an abusive husband to my mum.
From when I was about 7, it was abuse through the family from my dad. I ended up getting pregnant by him by the time I was 12, but a blind eye was constantly turned.
77% of children that grow up in an abusive household will go on to be abused.
I was sexually abused, I was beaten, I was left tied to beds for 2-3 days, not allowed to go home. I was drugged, tasered, I had internal injuries from the sexual abuse, I had cuts and bruises everywhere.
I remember the guy in question had come round to do an art lesson with my brother, and it was supposed to be like an outside thing, and I just said, can I go one day? And he said, yeah, I'll take you out there today then, because my brother had pulled out of it anyway, so I was like, okay. So he goes up there, and it was sort of next to a cornfield, and it towered over me, I was short and really small. That's when it all sort of started, and it was he started touching, and then I kind of knew that it was wrong. I knew this was not what I wanted, and I kept saying, what are you doing? This is weird. And then I started crying because it was upsetting me. I remember that. And then he just threw me on the floor, and then that was when it kind of, without going into it, you can kind of imagine that's when the physical side of it happened.
When I was 17, I met my husband. My dad killed himself just after I met my husband-to-be. Straight away, a very controlling relationship. He didn't used to want me going out, and then we hadn't been together very long, and he says he went to throw a drink at me, but he didn't, he glassed me. I ended up with 54 stitches coming down my face. The abuse, it was constant.
The average victim defends their attacker for 26 years.
The man who was sort of in the centre of it all groomed me online. He gained my trust by telling me he was a counsellor and he could help with my problems, so I started opening up, and it was nice to be believed and feel like that outsider sort of cared. And after he got my trust, it ended up with him sleeping with me, and I just completely fell for him. And then when he was saying to me, if you sleep with this person, that will make me happy, and if you cared about me, you'd do this. And then the grooming just ended up being abuse. The people around me didn't know what was going on. There were signs there, but they were too discreet, or I'd lie to cover up when people would ask me.
Back in the 90s and late 80s, it was kind of like that. Everyone was like your uncle, but they're not. So he was just basically one of them. He was an artist, a home tutor, and kind of like a family friend. I think he had more access to do things because of his position within the family, because he was trusted. And I remember I had bruises and scratches on my neck. I had bruises everywhere else, in certain areas. And then I remember him sort of saying, your family's not going to believe you, they're going to believe me. If you tell anyone, then I'm going to do it again, or I'm going to beat you up, or I'm going to kill you. And you know what your dad's like with things like this, so he'll probably end up beating you up and killing you anyway.
As a child, I had very mixed feelings because I thought I was special. I thought my dad loved me that much, and it caused a lot of animosity. Me and my sister ended up hating each other. My sister thought that Dad loved me more than her. She didn't realise what was going on. It was a long time till my mum even acknowledged it.
The United Kingdom's conviction rate on all sex crimes currently stands at 11%.
So my mum prompted me with questions which I denied until a friend went missing. The police got in touch with us because she'd gone missing, and then I slowly started to open up. Towards the end of the abuse, I found out it wasn't just me, it was happening to other girls, other boys. When I finally did go to the police, there was over 160 hours of police interviews. There were men and women from the age of 18, college students up to late 60s, early 70s. There were teachers, chief children's surgeons from hospitals, a police officer, solicitors, giving them all details, people's full names, birthdays, addresses, car registration numbers, workplace details, and they only ended up investigating 7 of 137 men and women, and only 3 of the 7 were charged, and there was no after support. We were just left.
Our dad was an abusive husband to my mum. Social services was always coming around our house like pretty much every couple of weeks, and the police were at our house like every weekend. The police knew what was going on. They didn't care. The amount of times he got arrested for domestic violence, but then they put him in a cell, let him out the next morning. And I still don't rate social services now because of my personal experience with them.
Social services come out when I was 12. I remember a few times saying, "Do you think Karen and Kerry's dad's abusing them?" And my mum would say, "No, not at all." The first 2 men that had been part of my life, my dad and my partner, they'd abused me. I did feel like I was drawn to violent and abusive men, but I also didn't think that nobody else would want me. The abuse, it was constant. There was never a time when I wouldn't be walking down the road and I'd have to hold my ribs because they were broke, or I'd have a black eye, or I'd have a cut somewhere. I was always marked. My face was never clear. Everybody stopped talking to me. I lost all friends. I lost everything. The atheist was in a pub once, and he turned on me, and an old school friend tried to stick up for me, and I ended up shouting at my pal.
I think more people need to speak out whether they think they'll be believed or not, because I didn't feel believed, but I know some people did believe me. Some justice was served, but not enough. And there is some help out there for people who do need to speak out. And I'll never stop telling my story, whether I'm believed or not. And the only people who do know the truth is myself and the people who were involved back then.
You know, I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. I went through self-harm. I was mentally depressed. I was really bad. Like, I couldn't even be around anyone. Tried to kill myself, I think, twice. And now, even now, I mean, this was over 3 decades ago, but even now I'd suffer with nightmares, and I definitely wasn't going to let that guy ruin my entire life, because he'd already ruined my childhood. I left it way too late, without a doubt, to speak out about it. And I think that was more to do with what we spoke about. It was kind of like a macho thing. Back in them days, you didn't really want to, admit that anything could happen to you like that. You have to remember that you are a victim, and it's not your fault, it's the person doing it.
Yeah, I do believe I'm a survivor. I haven't survived for nothing. I'd have something good to do on this earth, and I don't know what it is yet, but I am here to do some good, and my suffering has been for a reason. Yeah, definitely. I'm not a survivor, I'm a warrior. That's the way I look at myself.